He said, oh, I think you will. He's like, you really don't have a choice. And then he goes in to explain how broke her family is. So apparently the father made a bunch of bad investments years ago, tried to cover it up um, by getting mortgages on the house, and then of course he put like 2 mortgages on the home, and then of course they're both in default, and so now they're about to lose the home, so they're like really broke. And she's like, wait a minute, that's not possible. Like, I go to, me and my sister both go to Edison's. Like, that's expensive. And if we're broke, there's no way he would have been able to pay it. And they're like, well, he's been able to kind of hustle it and get that paid for you, but everything's pretty much closing in. So this is really the only way to save your family at this point. So Maris is sitting there like just blown away, that her parents have just been so incredibly negligent and allowed the situation to get to this point. And so she actually toughened up for a minute. She's like, okay, so if I do this, I need to get something in return. And he said, what? I'm going to forgive the loans for your parents, so that should be enough. And they'll still have faith. So what else do you want? She's like, I want $10 million. And McAllister goes, he looked at her like, how dare you? And she said, if I have to do this, those are my terms. So he does a counter offer. And initially he was like nothing. And then he goes $5 million. And she says, okay, deal. So now it's set. Her and Royce are going to have to start kind of showing that they're dating and then eventually get married. So following that, Maris has to go. There's a family heirloom. They have a Harry Winston wreath necklace. And if you don't know what that is, look it up. It's a beautiful piece of jewelry. And it is extremely expensive and so gorgeous. And so, but they have a necklace. They have a Harry wreath necklace that her mom had. And she wore it on her wedding day. She got it from her mom. And it's like a family heirloom. And it was supposed to be handed down to the girls when they got married. Well, at this point, they need all the money they can get. So, at this point, Maris is kind of taking over looking at their financials because, her major in college is economics. So she's like, okay, we got to fix this. So she takes the necklace to Costello's to get it appraised and so it can be sold. And, of course, the man's like, okay, are you sure? And she's like, yeah, I'm sure. And so she leaves from there, and then she has a meeting with Alice. Now, Alice Hale is the wife of McAllister. This is his second wife. His first wife died long years ago on a horse. She was riding a horse accident, and so she died. So this is his second wife. So McAllister's in his 50s. He's like 50, and Alice is in her early 40s, but she, one of those people, she keeps herself in shape so she looks even younger. And she's going to meet with her because they're going to have to change her whole look because she doesn't fit, their look at all. She has green hair, for God's sake. So they go do a makeover. So they have her hair now, it's brown, and, she has these normal clothes. She looks good, but it's just, she's not her quirky self anymore. And so now she has to get these social medias going. She has to show, kind of this different side of herself because that family is all about image. So now she has to recreate her image. And so after that, Alice starts to talk to her about the board. She's like, you're going to have a meeting with the board. And she gives her some information, but it's like whenever Maris would try and get more info out of her about the different board members, she couldn't get it. And so she's like, okay, that's weird, but whatever. So then her and Royce the next day have their actual first date. in a public place, so that everyone sees. Of course, everyone's going to be talking about it on social media, that type of thing. After their date, they go back to the estate, and they go up to his room, and they, of course, start, it gets kind of frisky. They start kissing, and then she felt bold, and she's like, you know what? I'm going to give him a hand job. And she had did a hand job before. So, well, actually, no, this was her second one that she done. The other one she done was with Richard, which was one of the guys from high school. That was her date to homecoming. So she's starting to like do that to him. And all of a sudden, it's like he stops her, pulls his pants up, and like quickly. And there was a knock on the door. And then in comes McAllister, because he only knocks once. And so she's still on the floor. And he was like looking, and McAllister's like, oh, well, I just came to see how the date went. But clearly it went pretty good. So after that, she leaves. And Maris had drove her car over there. And while Royce was walking her out, she was talking to him, and she was like, he was like, well, we'll meet, such and such else in a car. And she said, no, I'll just drive. And she's like, what, you don't never drive? And he's like, well, I never had to. So he's always had, drivers, so he's never driven. So she's like, I'll teach you. So she takes him for a driving lesson a few days later. And at first he's doing really well, doing great. And then I guess there's a little dip in the road, and he doesn't know how to react to certain things yet. So he swerves too hard, and then it makes the car almost spin out of control, and they almost go into a ditch. And instead of him hitting the brake, he kept hitting the gas. And so she's screaming, brake, brake. And finally he gets it, and just before they're about to like go over into a ditch. And so he jumps out the car, and she thought he was going to just leave her there, but he didn't. He came around to the side, and he's like, oh my God, are you okay? She's like, I'm fine. And of course, when you have all that adrenaline going, of course, here comes the passion. So of course he starts to kiss her, and she tells him very boldly, she's like, listen, I have waited, okay? I haven't let anyone touch me. You need to take care of me. And he's like, I'm not going to do that. She's like, no, you need to take care of me. She's like, if I would have died right now, I would have been a virgin. I would have died a virgin. How horrible is that? So he took her in the back seat, and he fingered her pretty hard, and he broke her hymen. So she was kind of pissed, because she was like, okay, dude, that is not how I wanted that to happen. And he said, trust me, we will be together. He's like, it'll happen, but not until I put a ring on your finger. And she's like, the hell? So that was the end of that scene. So she goes a few days, and she has to do an interview with the board. So there's about 9 members on the board, one of them being McAllister. And she's nervous, of course, because she doesn't know fully what they're going to ask her. So when she goes in, they ask her to tell her a little bit about herself, and she goes and she tells them, she goes to Edison's and all this stuff, and they're like, okay, enough of that. McAllister's like, how many sexual partners have you had? And she goes, none. And he looks at her like, what? He's like, you're a beautiful woman. How in the world have you never been with anyone? And she goes, because I haven't. And he's like, so do you even take birth control or anything like that? And what kind? And she's like, yeah, I take birth control. I take the pill. And he goes, so you've had no experience with another man? And she goes, I didn't say that. I just said I haven't had sex with a man yet. And so he goes, oh, so who was it? And what happened? And she goes, actually, it was Richard, which is one of the sons of one of the board members. And she was like, it was homecoming. I gave him a hand job. And he's like, oh. He's like, well, do you masturbate? And he thought that was going to throw her. And she goes, almost daily. And when she says that, there is this lustful look that comes over McAllister's eyes. And it was brief, but she caught it. And so he was like, well, okay, thank you for your time today. So she leaves. She goes into Roy. She's freaking out. She's like, why didn't you tell me what that was going to be about? Like, I just got asked all these freaking questions about my sex life that doesn't exist. So now everyone knows I'm a virgin. I'm embarrassed. And he's like, I had to do that. I couldn't tell you what the conversation was going to be, because if I did, he's like, I didn't know everything they were going to ask you. He was like, but if they knew that I had, prompted, let you know what was going to be asked, they would have seen right through it. You see how shrewd my father is. He would have known. And so while she's in his office, McAllister calls Royce, and he's screaming in the phone, and he's like, why didn't you tell me she was a virgin? You knew they were going to eat that up. And he had said he had an ace in the hole, and that's what it was. And he was like, hey, I didn't know I had to tell you. He's like, you knew what you were doing. You knew they were going to eat that up. They love her, because McAllister was trying to prove that she wasn't worthy. But that's clearly not going to happen, because everyone else loved her. So after that, she goes into party planning mode with Alice for Royce's, I guess, kind of not inauguration, but like he's going to be on the board. And I forgot to mention, her father initially thought he was going to be, because he's been with this company for over 20 something years. So he thought initially that he was going to be on the board, but being that he's made all these horrible financial, decisions, there's no way they're going to let him on a board. So he's not going to have that seat. So there's going to be this big party. And so throughout the party process, she's taking her snaps and, doing her different posts on Instagram, letting everyone know she's getting ready for this party. And she's just like, oh my gosh, I'm a great actress. This is so fake, because she could care less about this stuff. And so then she has to go get a party dress. She goes up into the Boston area. They go meet with a designer. And the first dress she puts on, it's a blue dress. It's cute. It's pretty. But it doesn't do it. And then she puts on the red dress, which is what we see on the cover of the book. And that is the one. It is gorgeous. And Royce popped up on her, actually. And she didn't even know. I don't think anyone knew he was going to come to her getting the dress. But he says his reasoning was because he just wanted to make sure they could match. And I'm like, she's thinking, I could have just sent you a picture. But it was, he wanted to be around her. And she knew it. So the next thing that happens is a few days later, she goes home. And she's noticing she's not seeing as much mail. And she's like, what is going on? Like, I don't see any bills, like anything. So she starts paying attention. And she actually caught the mailman and got the mail from him, and sees all of these late notices, past due, final notices. And she's like, what the hell? So she goes and finds her mom. And she's like, where's all the mail? Like, what have you been doing? And her mom's like, I don't know what you're talking about. So she starts ripping open drawers in the kitchen, like looking for them. And she finds all the mail that her mom has been stashing away. And she sees in there a recent purchase of $4,000 that her mom purchased a Chanel bag. And she's like, what is wrong with you? She's like, you know what the situation is financially. How could you be so incredibly what is wrong with you? And her mom's like, I was feeling really low. I mean, we had to let go of the housekeeper, and she was like family to us, and I haven't been able to go see my friends, and I had to cancel all my luncheons, and it's just been really difficult.